Hurricane Beryl finally makes its final landfall in Texas on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 8th. Beryl made a strong Category 1 landfall along the coast of Texas, making landfall near Matagorda at 3:40 a.m. local time, Central Daylight Time in Texas. We're still code orange for the storm right now, and it was the 23rd storm to form around the world. We had another one after that was Chris, but possibly other systems on the horizon in a different part of the world. But as of right now, the Atlantic is quiet after Beryl dies. Day 38 of Atlantic hurricane season. It's still got a little way to go yet though. It's going to weaken slowly at first, but then more rapidly as it moves through into northern Texas and then onto Arkansas. On day 52 of the hurricane season in the eastern Pacific, we're not watching anything right now. No areas of interest still at this point, and just a weak Aletta is what separates us from being at the very bottom of the pile in this year's hurricane season so far. Well, in the western Pacific, we have now designated a 10% chance for an area of interest in the South China Sea, something that will develop mainly this weekend and possibly into next week, a system that could become a substantial typhoon for Vietnam. And in the North Indian Ocean, we're not watching anything right now. No areas of interest, but a few thunderstorms and monsoonal showers all across India and in parts of Bangladesh and Myanmar. But nothing much else here, and for what it's worth, the Southwest Indian Ocean, no areas of interest right now, but still quite a fair bit of cloud cover there towards the Seychelles, but in general it's a quiet basin. Well, let's check in on Beryl. There is a Category 1 hurricane still with 80-mile-per-hour winds. It's just 16 kilometers from Bay City, 36 from Wharton, 88 from Houston, 179 from College Station, and 420 from Dallas. Hurricane warnings are still in effect, with tropical storm warnings extending as far east as Sabine Pass, which is also still under a storm surge warning. These warnings will be scaled down later today, but there are flash flood warnings in the area as well for substantial flooding threat with very high rain rates. Let's move over to the satellite imagery then, where you can see the progress of Beryl as it made landfall. There were big question marks over just how strong it would get. It was dilly-dallying at times in both direction and in how strong it was getting. Recon planes were in the storm right up until the landfall point, and they finally settled on a wind speed of near 85 miles per hour probably, although officially it was only 80, and an estimated pressure near the center of 979 millibars. It's not moved particularly far since then, but it is on its way. Radar will show that it's moving pretty much northwards, possibly even a slight jog to the northwest, contrary to what that satellite is showing. There's the radar imagery. You can see that the storm is quite clearly moving north, if not possibly a little bit of a westward track on that as well. But I think overall there, due north is probably the most likely movement. North side of it though, really powerful storms still. And here you can see all of those wind barbs. Those are observation stations showing various points. I think we've had a high wind gust so far of 92 miles per hour, and we've had sustained winds near hurricane force at some of those observation sites. Here's some more longer range imagery of the storm as it was moving towards land this morning. It did do a slight little bit of stalling. At first it did look like it would make landfall at around 2:30 Central Time. It ended up making landfall at 3:50. And there it is as it made that landfall and blowing up as it did so. Give it a few more hours over water and this could have rapidly intensified to become a Category 2 or even 3 if it had kept going in the way that it did. And this radar showing similar pictures as well, with those rain bands really affecting some of those larger cities right now. Here's a wider shot of the east coast of the United States out over the Atlantic Ocean. A frontal system moving off the coast there, but in general rather quiet apart from Beryl. And there it is once again looking at the Gulf, taking up the center stage almost, well, taking up the full picture that is, up the top left hand side moving into Texas. Caribbean, we've got no east pack imagery at the moment, unfortunately. I don't know why, but a few little storms there moving off Mexico. Looking at the Caribbean though, generally quite quiet. A few storms over the Lesser Antilles right now, and off the coast of Africa. Not too much going on here, just getting one or two little waves moving off the coast. There's the Philippines and the Western Pacific, lots of showers and thunderstorms just off the east coast of the Philippines, and even bigger storms down towards the southwest, and more monsoonal patterns continuing across the Indochina region and towards India. And that's a look at the Arabian Sea, also showing substantial showers off the west coast. Sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific look decent still, 30 degrees in a few spots and a little bit higher even, and extending out over towards the west, but pretty cool in those higher latitudes. The Atlantic though is really bubbling up with very warm waters off the Gulf Coast as a rule there. From Texas round to Florida, temperatures are touching 32 degrees Celsius. And of course it has been hot around the United States recently. In the Western Pacific, also boiling hot over a very large area, well above 30 degrees Celsius there, waiting for just a couple of storms to really take advantage of those really warm SSTs. In the North Indian Ocean, those temperatures a little bit cooler, but generally hovering at around 29 degrees in the Bay of Bengal, and in the east part of the Arabian Sea, a similar number. Let's take a look at the anomalies compared to average then. You can see just how warm it is compared to normal in the subtropical zones of the West Pacific. Extreme values in a few spots there. Eastern Pacific is generally quite tame, although a little bit above average in the areas that count. And in the Atlantic it is generally 2 to 3 degrees above average, mainly in the main development region, but also in the Caribbean and off the coast of Texas. A little hot spot locally there as well, 2 to 3 degrees above. Oceanic heat content is really relatively low right now in the Eastern Pacific. It's been struggling. In the Western Pacific though, there's bunches of it right there. A huge area off the coast of the Philippines extending eastwards and northwards up towards Taiwan as well. And looking at the North Atlantic, still high amounts of energy concentrated across the Caribbean Sea there, and also the loop current looking good too in the Gulf of Mexico, and a secondary warm spot towards the west not far from where Beryl was a couple of days ago. Also quite warm along the Gulf Stream and through the Bahamas there too. So let's take a look at the GFS computer model then for the next 5 days. First of all, looking at what Beryl does, well, it rapidly devolves into a remnant low, moves through north of Tennessee into the central part of the United States, through Ohio probably, and to the eastern Great Lakes. But it does weaken quite quickly. In 12 hours time it will probably barely be a tropical storm, unless Beryl has some more tricks up its sleeve and decides to defy all of this land interaction, but wind shear will be rapidly rising. The West Pacific showing off a potential system in the South China Sea. This is an interesting one because some other models are suggesting that there might be a secondary system forming east of the Philippines, and that could steal some of this system's thunder, but we have decided to plump for this system at a 10% on our forecast in the next 7 days. This is a 5-day look at this potential storm forming at the end there, a very large system in the South China Sea. Those little outlines there are all flash flood warnings in Texas right now, and there's 4 of them, maybe more by the time this goes out. We're expecting up to 6 inches of further rainfall in all of those areas, possibly 6 inches as far north as the Texarkana area as well, and significant amounts moving further north too. Southeast of St. Louis, 3 inches, through Indianapolis, 2 to 3 inches, and up towards Detroit, possibly getting up to 2 inches, and even into Ontario, Canada, towards Toronto, 2 inches of rain possible from the remnants of Beryl. Into the longer range then, day 5 to 10, we're watching that Western Pacific development. So a big typhoon forming there off Vietnam, and it hugs the coast for a bit, then moves inland and weakens substantially. Then this second system looks like it might start forming out at sea, a small system to begin with there, and entering those higher latitudes, subtropical zone mainly, but the precursor to it is around for quite a while. But really a messy situation in Vietnam with lots of winds around that whole area and heavy rainfall. That's up to day 10. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our products as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request at any time. And our still waiting for Hone t-shirt still available as well, because we've been waiting for that storm for a very long time in the Central Pacific. Still no sign of it yet. Well, perhaps a little parade eventually begins in the Eastern Pacific in the Scilly Range. This is day 10 to 16, and we call it the Scilly Range because it's usually too far out to make any kind of decision on. But 3 storms there surviving. The first 2 not particularly strong. The first one has a massive band to begin with, you can see. Then the second one is quite a weak system, and in the background, the backdrop of it being a much more powerful system by the looks of things, number 3, getting on towards hurricane strength as it pushes through towards the west-northwest. In the Western Pacific, though, a huge turn up here because this little system rapidly intensifies and becomes a very powerful typhoon, potentially category 5 on this run, pressure down to 924 millibars, and then it starts to drift towards the northeast towards the end of that. Like I said, Scilly Range for a reason. We've got no inclination that this is going to get anywhere near that strength or even form yet. So hold your horses and we'll wait and see what happens in future model runs. A second system off to its east there as well. Well, what happened on this day? It was July 8th, 2002 when we had a legitimate category 4, and it was Typhoon Shatan, which I believe was retired from the naming list after this. It was near its peak intensity of 150 miles per hour at the start of July 8th and gradually started weakening as it headed towards the Ryukyu Islands. 2 other storms also formed, Halong out in the open ocean near Micronesia, and Nakri, which was in the northeast South China Sea off the coast of China, headed for Taiwan. A very interesting 22 years ago. Well, back to today, and we are looking at the 2024 naming list. The next name in the Atlantic is Debbie. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Bud. And in the Central Pacific, we are of course still waiting for Hone and our 25th storm of the year around the world. I said that right, didn't I? 25th storm of the year around the world. Western Pacific, next storm is Gamey, and in the North Indian Ocean it will be Asna at this time. We are still code orange for Beryl. I expect we'll have at least some form of live update later this afternoon or evening local time. We're not sure of the schedule yet, but we'll keep you up to date on social media and on our YouTube channel. The Australian region's next name is Robin. Southwest Indian Ocean will start the next season with Ansha, and in the South Pacific next up is Pitta. That's all for now. We'll be back again soon. Become an Ultimate Fan today.